On the 16th of December, 1944, at the pre-dawn hour of 0530, the world held its breath along the Schnee-Eifel Ridge, a frozen spine of land separating Belgium and Germany. You can almost feel the frozen mud as it shattered under the weight of German boots, a sound heralding what history would remember as the Battle of the Bulge, their most ambitious offensive since the fall of France in 1940. Massed across that ridge, a force of 200,000 Wehrmacht soldiers carried with them a comforting belief, a story they had been told about their American counterparts. They were convinced that American soldiers were soft, men who leaned on material comforts rather than the pure spirit of a warrior, citizen soldiers who paled in comparison to the hardened fighters of Germany. In just a few hours, a terrible and catastrophic truth would unfold, revealing how profoundly mistaken they were. The cold, hard mathematics of firepower were poised to teach a lesson so brutal it would obliterate every single assumption the German forces harbored about their enemy. Every single American infantryman shouldered a weapon that General George S. Patton, in a letter dated January 26, 1945, to the Chief of Ordnance, would immortalize as the greatest battle implement ever devised, the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle. Against the relentless capability of this rifle, German soldiers would find their own bolt-action Kar 98K rifles to be tragically and hopelessly outclassed. The German soldier of 1944 was, in essence, armed with the very same technology his father had carried into the trenches of 1918, the Karabiner 98 Kurz, a bolt-action rifle whose design DNA traced directly back to the Mauser model of 1898. To fire this weapon was a deliberate, manual process. After each round was spent, the soldier had to cycle the bolt himself. Lift it, pull it back, push it forward, and lock it down. In the crucible of combat, this translated to a practical maximum of just 15 aimed shots per minute, and only in the hands of a highly skilled rifleman. The entire structure of the German infantry squad was built to serve its MG-42 machine gun, a truly magnificent weapon capable of unleashing a torrent of 1,200 rounds per minute. The riflemen in the squad existed in a supporting role, their primary duty to carry ammunition for and protect this central weapon. Their Kar 98K rifles were secondary, tools for precise shots or desperate self-defense. This tactical doctrine had proven its worth from the streets of Warsaw to the boulevards of Paris, and all the way to the very gates of Moscow. But the Americans, you see, had completely rewritten the very rules of infantry warfare. Every American rifleman carried a semi-automatic weapon that could send 8 rounds downrange as fast as he could press the trigger, and then, in less than 3 seconds, he could reload with a fresh and block clip and do it all again. So where a German squad brought 1 machine gun and 9 slow-firing rifles to a fight, an American squad answered with 1 machine gun, 1 automatic rifle, and 11 rapid-firing semi-automatic rifles. The resulting gap in firepower was simply staggering. This shocking revelation first began to dawn in the deserts of North Africa in 1943, though the initial reports were largely dismissed by most German soldiers as battlefield rumors. Following the fierce clashes at Kasserine Pass, German field officers began sending urgent dispatches back to Berlin, noting with alarm that American forces seemed to be equipped with semi-automatic rifles in massive numbers. The response from the German High Command was a testament to their complete inability to fathom the sheer scale of American industrial power. They concluded it was likely a case of confusion, mistaking automatic weapons or Thompson submachine guns for standard-issue rifles, ultimately declaring that equipping an army with semi-automatic rifles in such quantities was simply impossible given American production capabilities. Their assessment was catastrophically, devastatingly wrong. By February of 1943, the combined output of Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms was churning out more than 4,000 M1 Garand rifles every single day. By the time the Allies stormed the beaches on D-Day, over 3 million of these weapons had already been built. In stark contrast, the German war machine, even with the grim advantages of slave labor and total economic mobilization, had only ever succeeded in producing its own semi-automatic rifles in experimental, almost trivial, quantities. According to official U.S. Army records from the North African Campaign, captured German prisoners reacted with sheer disbelief when confronted with American supply and production figures. One captured German intelligence report from Tunisia, now preserved in the U.S. National Archives, reads, "American infantry units appear to possess semi-automatic weapons as standard equipment. This cannot be verified as it would require industrial capacity beyond reasonable estimation." Now picture the scene. June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach, 0800 hours. The German 352nd Infantry Division is dug in, defending fortified positions that command a perfect view over the easy red sector. German military documents from that battle, captured after the beachhead was finally secured, vividly described the defenders' shock at the sheer volume of American rifle fire. One German after-action report starkly notes, "Enemy infantry maintains continuous rifle fire while advancing. No pause for bolt manipulation observed. Fire volume exceeds machine gun positions." The brutal hedgerow fighting that consumed Normandy in the weeks after D-Day threw this firepower disparity into even sharper, more terrifying relief. Within the claustrophobic confines of the bocage, combat engagements seldom happened beyond 100 meters. Suddenly, the German doctrine of long-range, precision marksmanship was rendered utterly irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was the volume of accurate fire that could be delivered in an instant. A captured German training manual from the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, dated July 1944, offered a chilling acknowledgement of the American advantage. "Enemy rifle squads generate fire equivalent to our machine gun positions. Conventional suppression tactics ineffective against semi-automatic rifle-equipped units." German ordnance officers who had the chance to examine captured M1 Garands were left in awe by the incredible manufacturing quality that had been achieved on such a massive scale. The rifle's operation was a marvel, using a gas piston system that harnessed the expanding gases from a fired cartridge to automatically cycle the action. Its en-bloc clip system was revolutionary, allowing a soldier to reload in mere seconds. But most remarkably, these rifles were manufactured to such precise tolerances that German industry simply could not hope to match it in mass production. A Wehrmacht technical intelligence report from August 1944, captured at Falaise and now held in British military archives, stated unequivocally, "The M1 rifle demonstrates mass production techniques we cannot replicate. Components show precise tolerances maintained across thousands of examples. Interchangeability of parts is complete. Any component from one rifle functions perfectly in another." The German Gur 43, or G43, was their desperate attempt to answer the M1 Garand, but the stark realities of production tell the entire story. While every American infantryman carried an M1, the G43 was issued sparingly, primarily to snipers and other specialist troops. The total verified German production run for the entire war amounted to a mere 402,713 rifles, a number dwarfed by the more than 5.4 million M1 Garands produced. The Battle of the Bulge would showcase this firepower gap at its most devastating. German forces managed to achieve complete tactical surprise, launching their attack with overwhelming numerical superiority in many sectors of the front. And yet, time and again, small American units, theoretically outnumbered and completely surrounded, stubbornly held their ground, sustained by nothing less than their superior firepower. December 17, 1944, Elsenborn Ridge. Listen to the voices from the past, preserved in official U.S. Army combat interviews conducted in the immediate aftermath of the battle. The men of the 99th Infantry Division, outnumbered 3-1 in some areas, held their lines against impossible odds, primarily through the sheer, unrelenting volume of their rifle fire. One infantry sergeant's report paints a vivid picture. "We just kept firing. 8 rounds, reload, 8 more rounds. The Germans couldn't advance through that wall of lead." German casualties during that first brutal week of the offensive soared far beyond all their planning estimates. A captured operations order from the elite 12th SS Panzer Division contained a stark warning. "American small arms fire prevents movement, even with numerical superiority. Each enemy position must be treated as an automatic weapon emplacement." The numbers themselves told a story that could not be denied. By December of 1944, American factories had delivered over 4 million M1 Garands. Springfield Armory hit its absolute peak of production in January 1944, an astonishing achievement, manufacturing an incredible 122,001 rifles in that single month. That breaks down to 3,936 rifles per day, or 164 rifles every single hour of round-the-clock production. The workforce at Springfield Armory was itself a demonstration of American mobilization. By June 1943, women made up 43% of the workers, 5,210 women out of a total of 12,095 employees. These workers, many of whom had no previous manufacturing experience, were producing weapons that consistently exceeded German quality standards. Winchester Repeating Arms Company added another 513,880 rifles to the war effort. International Harvester, a company traditionally known for making farm equipment, successfully retooled its factories to produce 337,623 M1 Garands. Harrington and Richardson would contribute another 428,600 rifles during and immediately following the war. This distributed network of production meant that no single bombing raid could ever hope to disrupt America's ability to manufacture rifles. The M1 Garand brought about a fundamental and irreversible change in infantry tactics. American squads could now conduct marching fire assaults, a terrifying concept where they advanced across the battlefield while maintaining continuous fire superiority. Official U.S. Army training films from 1943, now preserved in military archives, clearly demonstrate this technique. Soldiers moving forward in bounds, each man capable of delivering 8 aimed shots even while on the move. German tactical doctrine, codified in their 1943 infantry manual, Heeresdienstvorschrift 300/1, was built entirely on the assumption of bolt-action rifles for fire and movement. All of their calculations for suppressive fire, for ammunition consumption, and for assault tactics were based on a rate of fire that American soldiers could exceed by a factor of 3. The U.S. Army Field Manual 7-10, the 1944 edition for the Infantry Rifle Company, built entire tactical concepts around the reality of semi-automatic firepower. As it stated, the semi-automatic M1 rifle provides the foundation of infantry firepower. All tactical movements assume sustained fire capability of the rifle squad. Of course, a semi-automatic rifle was only as effective as its ammunition supply. Here too, American industry achieved a scale that was simply remarkable. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant in Missouri, a sprawling complex covering 3,900 acres, produced billions of rounds during the war years. While the specific production numbers 4.30-06 ammunition cannot be precisely verified, the plant's total output reached 7 billion rounds, more than enough to sustain unprecedented volumes of fire. German ammunition logistics, as documented in Wehrmacht supply records, typically allocated just 60 rounds per rifleman for a major offensive operation. American soldiers, by contrast, carried a basic load of 80 rounds in en-bloc clips, with the comforting knowledge that virtually unlimited resupply was available from the vast logistics network that supported them. January 1945. The German offensive had finally ground to a halt, and now American forces were counterattacking in the bitter, biting cold. Winter conditions, which should have favored the defenders, instead served to highlight yet another advantage of the M1. The severe cold had a crippling effect on the operation of bolt-action rifles. Frozen hands struggled to manipulate the small metal bolt. Gun oil thickened in the cold, making the action stiff and difficult to cycle. The M1 Garand, with its semi-automatic action, required only a simple pull of the trigger, a task that could be performed even while wearing heavy winter gloves. Its en-bloc clip could be loaded quickly even with numb fingers, while German soldiers were forced to painstakingly load individual rounds into their Kar 98K magazines. U.S. Army medical records from the Battle of the Bulge note a significantly lower rate of frostbite casualties among American riflemen compared to German forces, a difference partly attributed to the reduced need for direct hand exposure during reloading and firing sequences. March 1945. As American forces massed across the Rhine, German defenders found themselves facing an impossible mathematical problem. A Wehrmacht planning document, captured at Remagen, calculated the defensive requirements for the river based on traditional firepower ratios. It followed the standard military doctrine, a rule of thumb since the Napoleonic era, that one defender could effectively engage 3 attackers. But this entire calculation was built on the assumption of equal rates of fire. With their M1 Garands, American attackers could generate 3 times the rate of fire of the German defenders. The traditional, time-honored mathematics of defense completely collapsed. The Rhine crossing succeeded with far lower casualties than military planners had anticipated, a success largely credited to the overwhelming volume of small arms fire that suppressed the German positions. The story of the M1 Garand is inseparable from the story of American industrial mobilization. Springfield Armory in Massachusetts was transformed from a modest government arsenal into a colossal production facility. The main production building alone stretched for over a mile in length. Each rifle that came off the line had passed through 1,000 different operations, each one performed by a specialized machine. The efficiency of this production reached extraordinary levels. In 1940, producing a single M1 Garand required 117 man-hours of labor. By 1943, that number had plummeted to just 75 man-hours. By 1945, Springfield Armory could complete a rifle with a mere 31 man-hours of labor, at a cost of only $31 per rifle, a staggering reduction from the $83 it cost at the war's start. The transformation of the workforce itself was just as remarkable. The percentage of women workers at the armory rose from 20% in June 1942 to 43% just 1 year later. These workers, trained in a matter of weeks rather than years, operated specialized machinery that ensured perfect parts interchangeability, a level of precision that German craftsmen, despite their years of apprenticeship and training, simply couldn't achieve. The M1 Garand was also significantly easier for new recruits to train with than traditional bolt-action rifles. U.S. Army training records show that recruits could achieve basic proficiency with the M1 in just 2 weeks, compared to the months required to master the intricacies of a bolt-action weapon. The semi-automatic action was forgiving of imperfect technique. Even a nervous soldier, under the immense stress of combat, could still deliver a high volume of effective fire. At Fort Benning, Georgia, the infantry school completely revolutionized its training programs to take advantage of the M1 Garand. Training reports from 1943 show dramatic improvements in recruit qualification scores right after the adoption of the semi-automatic rifles. The percentage of recruits who qualified as expert marksmen increased by a full 40% compared to the earlier results with bolt-action training. Even before the landings on D-Day, the brutal Italian campaign had already demonstrated the M1's clear superiority. At Monte Cassino, from January to May of 1944, the 34th, 36th, and 45th Infantry Divisions engaged elite German paratroopers in grueling mountain warfare, a type of combat where traditional doctrine suggested that long-range, precise bolt-action rifles would excel. Instead, American forces discovered that the sheer volume of fire mattered far more than pinpoint precision in the chaotic reality of mountain fighting. The ability to rapidly engage multiple targets while climbing steep, unforgiving terrain proved to be a decisive advantage. While specific documentation of M1 use at Monte Cassino is limited, these divisions were fully equipped with M1 Garands as their standard-issue weapon according to their table of organization and equipment. Germany's attempts to match the M1 Garand ended in complete and utter failure. The Gür 43, Germany's own semi-automatic rifle, was plagued by reliability problems and severe production limitations. As previously noted, the total verified production reached only 402,713 rifles, a figure that represents less than 10% of American M1 production. The G43 also required extensive and costly hand-fitting during its assembly. Quality control proved to be an impossible task under the chaotic conditions of the late war. Each rifle demanded specialized maintenance by highly trained armorers. When they malfunctioned, a frequent occurrence according to German ordnance reports, they became little more than expensive clubs. Wehrmacht technical assessments, captured by Allied forces, consistently rated the G43 as inferior to the M1 Garand in reliability, accuracy, and ease of maintenance. More tellingly, German soldiers themselves would readily use captured M1 Garands in preference to their own semi-automatic rifles whenever they had the chance, despite strict regulations forbidding the use of enemy weapons. Reports trickling in from the Pacific Theater, available through intelligence channels, provided German staff officers with even more evidence of American firepower superiority. Japanese forces, using tactics remarkably similar to German doctrine and armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, were being systematically destroyed by M1 Garand-equipped American forces. The battle for Iwo Jima, from February to March of 1945, which was happening simultaneously with the Rhine crossings in Europe, demonstrated that American soldiers could defeat fanatical defenders in the most difficult terrain imaginable, all through superior firepower at the individual level. These reports, when they finally reached German commanders through neutral sources, only served to reinforce the utter hopelessness of their military situation. Post-war interviews conducted by the U.S. Army Center of Military History provide crucial, first-hand testimony about German reactions to American firepower. SLA Marshall's combat interviews, conducted on the battlefield immediately after engagements, consistently recorded German prisoners expressing their profound shock at the capabilities of American rifles. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, who commanded German forces in Italy, wrote in his post-war memoirs, "The American infantryman, armed with his semi-automatic rifle, possessed a firepower advantage that we could never overcome. Our tactical superiority meant nothing when each enemy soldier could fire 8 rounds to our 1. General Otto von Manschenfeld, one of the key commanders during the Battle of the Bulge, testified during his interrogation after the war. The American semi-automatic rifle gave their infantry a decisive advantage. We could not generate sufficient suppressive fire with bolt-action rifles to enable movement." The final production numbers tell the complete and irrefutable story. M1 Garand production, verified from official records, Springfield Armory, 4,188,669, Winchester, 513,880, International Harvester, 337,623, Harrington and Richardson, 428,600. The grand total, 5,468,772 rifles. Now consider the verified German semi-automatic production, for the Gur 43 and all its variants, just 402,713. This creates a production ratio of 13.6 to 1 in America's favor. Look at the peak production rates. Springfield Armory alone was producing 3,936 M1 Garands per day in January of 1944. All German factories combined could only manage approximately 300 semi-automatic rifles per day. Supporting these millions of M1 Garands required a logistical system of vast and unprecedented scale. By 1945, American supply lines were delivering 20 million rounds of ammunition daily to the European forces, along with sufficient spare parts to maintain 3 million rifles and a complete overhaul capability at the depot level. German logistics, as documented in Wehrmacht quartermaster records, struggled to provide even the most basic ammunition allowances. The standard allocation of 60 rounds per man for offensive operations compared poorly to the American basic load of 80 rounds, which came with the assurance of unlimited resupply. The economic dimension of this conflict proved to be just as decisive. An M1 Garand cost the U.S. government only $31 by 1945, a price reduced from $83 at the war's beginning through remarkable production improvements. The German G43, by contrast, cost approximately 350 Reichsmarks, a figure nearly 4 times as much when adjusted for purchasing power. And yet, the M1 proved to be more reliable and far easier to maintain. This cost efficiency was a feature throughout the entire supply chain. American factories produced M1 Garands using specialized machinery that required a massive initial investment but dramatically reduced the per-unit costs over time. German factories, repeatedly bombed and forced to relocate, never achieved these comparable economies of scale. The U.S. National Archives holds extensive documentation of German reactions to American firepower. Intelligence reports compiled from interrogations consistently show German soldiers and officers expressing their amazement at American small arms capabilities. One particularly revealing document is a captured German training circular from December 1944, which was attempting to prepare troops for the reality of facing American forces. It warns, enemy riflemen must be considered as automatic weapon operators. Traditional fire and movement tactics must be adjusted accordingly. Expect continuous fire from all enemy positions. General George S. Patton's assessment, it turns out, was nothing short of prophetic. In his January 26, 1945 letter to Major General Levin H. Campbell, Jr., the Chief of Ordnance, Patton wrote with conviction, "In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised." This definitive statement came after he had observed the rifle's incredible performance throughout the entire European campaign. Patton understood a fundamental truth: wars are won not by moments of individual heroism, but by superior firepower delivered consistently by ordinary soldiers. His Third Army's lightning-fast advances were possible in part because his infantry units could generate overwhelming firepower on their own, without having to wait for machine gun support. John C. Garand, the Canadian-American designer, had created something more than just a rifle. Born Jean Cantius Garand, he began his development work at Springfield Armory all the way back in 1919. His final design, which was finalized in 1932 and officially adopted on January 9, 1936, was specifically optimized for mass production by a semi-skilled workforce. In a remarkable act of patriotism, Garand assigned all of his patent rights to the U.S. government, receiving no royalties whatsoever despite the fact that his invention was produced in the millions. His design philosophy, simplicity, reliability, and manufacturability, was the very embodiment of American industrial principles. The M1 Garand represented American values translated into steel and wood. While German military culture emphasized elite units equipped with specialized, complex weapons, American doctrine equipped every single infantryman with the best available technology. It was a philosophy of mass production making advanced capability universally available. This democratization of firepower was a direct reflection of American society itself. The rifle that won the war was produced by housewives and teenagers, it was carried by citizen soldiers, and it was supplied by an arsenal of democracy that viewed industrial capacity as a direct form of military power. The M1 Garand's superiority had strategic implications that reached far beyond individual tactical firefights. American commanders could plan their operations with the certain knowledge that their infantry possessed an inherent firepower advantage. German commanders, in contrast, had to constantly account for the fact that they were outgunned at the most basic, fundamental level. This reality affected everything, from simple patrol operations to major strategic offensives. American small units could operate with a high degree of independence, confident in their ability to dominate any engagement through firepower. German units, on the other hand, required dedicated machine gun support for any kind of offensive action, a dependency that severely limited their tactical flexibility. Military historians consistently identify the M1 Garand as a decisive factor in the American victory. Dr. John Ellis, in his work, The Sharp End of War, calculated that the American infantry's firepower superiority contributed to a 40% reduction in casualties compared to what bolt-action-equipped forces would have likely suffered. The U.S. Army's own official history, United States Army in World War II, notes that the semi-automatic rifle gave American infantry a margin of superiority that was clearly evident in every theater of war. Today, the M1 Garand remains an iconic symbol, displayed in museums all around the world as the weapon that won World War II. For the German veterans who had to face it on the battlefield, the rifle came to symbolize the overwhelming power of American industry against their own military traditions. The rifle that General Patton called the greatest battle implement ever devised had proved him correct through the cold, undeniable certainty of mathematics. It didn't just win firefights, It demonstrated that an industrial democracy could outproduce and outgun a totalitarian militarism. The M1 Garand's superiority was confirmed once again in Korea from 1950 to 1953, when Communist forces launched terrifying human wave attacks. M1-equipped UN forces were able to generate a sufficient volume of fire to break up assaults that would have certainly overwhelmed units equipped with older bolt-action rifles. Interestingly, when West Germany rebuilt its military as the Bundeswehr in the 1950s, one of its very first decisions was to adopt semi-automatic rifles, having learned the bitter lesson of 1944-45. No modern military would ever again consider equipping its primary infantry forces with bolt-action rifles. Every modern assault rifle in existence today traces its design philosophy back to the incredible success of the M1 Garand. The principle of semi-automatic fire for every infantryman, established by the M1, became a universal military doctrine. The German Sturmgewehr 44, which was itself developed as a direct response to facing M1 Garands on the eastern and western fronts, went on to influence the design of the Soviet AK-47, which in turn influenced all subsequent infantry weapons. The M1 Garand had not just won a war, it had revolutionized warfare itself, proving that firepower at the individual level could be just as decisive as artillery or armor. The M1 Garand embodied the American production philosophy, designed for mass production, not for artisan craft. Every single component was engineered for manufacture by specialized machinery that could be operated by workers with minimal training. This very approach would come to dominate global manufacturing for decades after the war. Where German production philosophy emphasized highly skilled craftsmen producing limited quantities of complex, precise weapons, the American philosophy emphasized simplified designs produced in massive quantities by ordinary workers. The G-43's failure wasn't just a technical one, it was a philosophical one. It was a weapon designed for an industrial system that simply could not support its production requirements. The M1 Garand represented more than just a military victory. It was proof that a democratic, industrial society could defeat a totalitarian, militaristic one through superior organization and production. Every rifle that came off the assembly line was evidence that free workers in a democracy could outproduce slave labor in a dictatorship. The German soldiers who faced the M1 Garands learned this lesson in the most direct and brutal way possible, through an unrelenting curtain of incoming fire that never seemed to stop. They had been told they were superior warriors facing weak, materialistic Americans. Instead, they discovered they were obsolete soldiers facing the very future of warfare. When German forces finally surrendered in May of 1945, they had been defeated not just militarily, but technologically and industrially as well. The M1 Garand stood as the ultimate symbol of this defeat, a mass-produced weapon that outperformed German craftsmanship, carried by citizen soldiers who outfought German professionals. The mathematics were simply inescapable. 5.4 million M1 Garands versus 402,713 German semi-automatic rifles. A 3-to-1 firepower advantage at the squad level. Production costs quartered through efficiency. Training time halved through design simplicity. Behind every one of these statistics were grim human realities. American soldiers survived because their M1 Garands gave them a decisive firepower superiority. German soldiers died because their Kar 98K rifles left them outgunned in every single engagement. The M1 Garand had been exactly what Patton declared, the greatest battle implement ever devised. It won its war not through elegance or precision, but through overwhelming firepower delivered by millions of rifles produced by the arsenal of democracy. For the German soldiers who faced it, the M1 Garand was much more than just a superior weapon. It was proof that their entire worldview was fundamentally wrong. They had placed their faith in racial superiority, in military tradition, and in the indomitable warrior spirit. The M1 Garand proved that industrial capacity, democratic production, and citizen soldiers could destroy the most professional military force in the world. The rifle that won the war had done more than just defeat an enemy. It had demonstrated that free societies could organize, produce, and fight more effectively than totalitarian states. In 8-round clips and a torrent of semi-automatic fire, American democracy had proved its superiority over German fascism. The German soldiers were indeed outraged by Patton's greatest battle implement, but their outrage was, in truth, a form of recognition. It was a recognition that they had challenged the wrong enemy, with the wrong weapons, based on the wrong assumptions. The M1 Garand had taught them, one firefight at a time, that modern war was won not by warriors, but by workers, not by heroes, but by industry, not by tradition, but by innovation. In the end, that was the M1 Garand's greatest victory, proving that democratic industrial might could overwhelm any enemy, no matter how professional, motivated, or ideologically committed they might be. The German soldiers who cursed the distinctive ping of an ejecting and block clip were really cursing their own failure to understand what they were fighting. It was not just an army, it was the arsenal of democracy itself. The M1 Garand remains in military museums and private collections worldwide, still functional after 8 decades, still admired for its revolutionary design. It stands as a powerful testament to American ingenuity, to its industrial power, and to the democratic principle that the best equipment should be available to every soldier, not just to the elites. For those who faced it in combat, the M1 Garand was unforgettable, the weapon that turned citizen soldiers into superior warriors through a simple mechanical advantage. It proved that technology and production, not ideology and tradition, would determine the future of warfare. The greatest battle implement ever devised had earned its title through proven superiority on every single battlefield where it served, carried by soldiers who understood that they held democracy's answer to tyranny in their hands.